Welcome to Integrated Wellbeing YouTube channel and podcast for people in grief and the professionals who serve them. We provide education, inspiration, and practical tools by interviewing those bereaved by loss, mental health professionals, and grief specialists. Integrated Wellbeing Institute seeks to awaken the griever to their inner peace through the guidance of their body. And today I am so grateful to welcome Neena Verma to our time together today. Neena is an author, an esteemed grief coach, and you will read all about her credentials in the space beneath this interview. So, Neena, welcome. I am so grateful to see you, and you're coming to us today from India. So there's a great deal of difference in the time that we're seeing one another today.
Namaste and thank you, Georgena, for your lovely, gracious invitation. And yes, I'm happy to join you from across the oceans, across
Absolutely.
the continents.
Yes, it is. And the world is getting smaller and smaller every day.
Absolutely.
And so for us to realize the oneness that we're in is so important. So I know your work began as a grieving mother. If you will introduce us, please, to your beloved son and your first and second books, we'll go from there, Neena.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to share my son's story and my story. Before that, just a kind of gentle correction. Actually, I forayed into grief and trauma work much before that, much before my loss. It was in 2007 or so. It was not by design. It just so happened that I was doing a leadership coaching assignment for senior executive. And by third session or so, I could sense that the gentleman was sitting on a huge pile of frozen grief and trauma from his early childhood. And it was, forget about being unaddressed, it was in fact unrecognized. So I shared back with the organization that I'm not the right person, though I was an applied behavioral science professional trained in depth psychology, appreciative and body positive psychology, and so many other things. An accredited sensitivity trainer. So I did have background, but I was not a trained grief therapist. So I told them that he perhaps needs therapy, not coaching. And they appreciated, they acknowledged this. But then about 5 weeks later or so, they came back to me saying that he's feeling some kind of a comfort with you. He wants to continue. And I was very nervous because, I didn't know really what to do because it was like really frozen, solidified grief, longer than 3 decades old, multiple losses. As a little child, he had faced. So I was hesitant. I was very nervous, but the organization and the gentleman himself, their trust, called me. And I said, okay, I will stay put, but I didn't want to unnecessarily, end up causing him injury rather than help.
Yes.
So what I did was, to begin with, I just kind of compassionately held space for him. And slowly and gradually, he started to kind of, notice his own pain and acknowledge his pain and slowly and gradually allow voice to his suppressed, pain. And I think that itself was so cathartic, so therapeutic for him, that slowly and gradually things were as if some tiny shifts were beginning to happen. And so after the organization ended the sponsorship, he came back after a little while and he said, now I want to sponsor myself, but I want to stay with you for some more time. That was very heartening. And so in all, he stayed with me for about 19 months. And in the meanwhile, couple more referrals happened. And I realized that I had a fascination for this work. I developed keen interest in this work. I was both intrigued as well as I felt invited by this work. And I used to think to myself that maybe at that point in time, I was fully into organization change and development and leadership consulting. So I thought to myself at some point in time when I will actively retire from this, retire from this active consulting, maybe grief and trauma work will be my calling. And anyways, I was already, doing quite a bit of work in the spectrum of resilience. So the
Yes.
resilience and well-being. So they sat together. But who knew in 2014, my own loss would bring me face to face with this work in such a stark and shattering and in a way that it will implore me to do this work not for myself alone, but to dedicate myself in the service of others. So for some time, I was in my own shell, but as I then slowly and gradually returned to work, I decided to dedicate myself really to it. So there was a moment when I had to transition from my OD and leadership work to this. So this work became the mainstay of my professional work and personal life course in the last 6 years or so. It's the whole of all that I do now in the spectrum of grief, post-traumatic growth, resilience, well-being, emotional well-being, life purpose, clarity, transitions. But the journey had started in 2007. It was about 7 years before my own loss. Now, you wanted me to share something about my son.
Yes.
So I hope you notice him sitting right there behind me in the corner.
Yes.
His name is Utkarsh, and he's my first child. He's the one who's gifted me the glory of motherhood. And he stayed in his mortal presence with us in this world for 22 years and 3 months. A bright, happy, quiet, introverted boy. His brilliance was unmistakable. His genius showed through, even though he was quite quiet. So I'm quite a Sufi at heart, from an early age, from the time I think when he was 3.5 years or so, I started to get earliest glimpse of his deeply altruistic nature. Always just giving away everything. And no attachment to his belongings. And anyways, he did not have many belongings, but because he never wanted much, toys or clothes or books was his only indulgence. 8 years and 4 months of age, he decided to, all by himself, start a weekend pavement library in our neighborhood, in an urban slum area, for children from socioeconomically disadvantaged background who lived in that urban slum area. So he would carry, 2 backpacks, empty both the school bags, his and my younger son's school bag, and just stuff all the, encyclopedia and other stuff and picture books and whatever else in that, and ask me to drop him to that slum area. And around 11 a.m. in the morning, like any other day, carrying his tiffin and water bottle and a mat. And I used to be very anxious. So for some weeks, I used to just hide a little distance away and keep a watch on him. And and soon enough, I realized that, the kids who were gathering around him, they were so excited by this idea of somebody sitting with them on the pavement and helping them read and getting them excited about reading and helping them compose small jingles. And telling them about solar system, about planet Earth, about animals, and sensitizing them about hygiene. Those kids just found it like a wonder, big wonder, even though some of them were attending schools. So there was interest generated, and some parents used to, before we would reach, they would come and just kind of clear the place off and clean it and keep it ready for us. And a nearby shopkeeper, very sweetly, he said, you don't have to bring the stuff every weekend here. You can just leave it in my shop. So that was such a gracious thing. The whole collect, it's like, I think the goodness finds its own partners. So
Yes.
so it became a collective. And soon enough, some of those kids who were going to schools, they found our home and they started to come to our home during weekdays. Our tiny home during the afternoons was full of these kids who would need help with their homeworks, their revision, their test preparation, or just like that, play with my kids, their little puzzles and, they carom, board games, something like that.
Yes.
So my house was buzzing. And soon enough, he recruited me and my younger son also into the gang. And so this is what he was from 8 years and 4 months. So I can go on and tell you about so many other endeavors that he led. He served very quietly, very invisibly, all by himself. Um, Never had any interest whatsoever to be noticed, to be appreciated, to be to be recognized. No,
Yes.
in fact, very averse to that. So his motto in life was share quietly and do what you can. He was also the youngest kid in his school to volunteer when the school started an afternoon school for girls from socioeconomically disadvantaged background. They requested parents to come forward and volunteer as educators.
Yes.
Volunteer their time, and at that point in time, I was in a full-time, very very demanding career, and so he wanted me to volunteer, and I said, how can I? I mean, I used to return home late in the evening. So next thing that I come to know is that he's the one who volunteered himself. And he was so tiny. He was such a young boy. And when his class teacher informed me, I am till date so guilty and ashamed that my first worry was how am I going to arrange his pickup?
Yes.
3 days in the week that he will be staying back and will be returning. How am I going to arrange for the drop of his additional tiffin? And how am I going to arrange his pickup later in the evening? I feel so guilty and ashamed that instead of, feeling so proud and loving towards my boy, my first reaction was out of anxiety. And but later when I came to know that the school was very happy that there's a kid who's volunteering when they were asking only the parents to volunteer.
Yes.
So this became an example, and they asked some of the older kids to volunteer. So this is what Utkarsh was, Utkarsh is. Share quietly and do what you can is one of the several precious gifts that he's left with me as his legacy.
Yes.
And this is what I am trying to take forward in life.
How beautiful. And what's so interesting to me is as you share with me, Neena, your son's beautiful heart, it was that unexpected cardiac arrest on September 24th, 2014, that took him from this world. And here is this heart that had given so much, this heart that left such a legacy. And so for me, it's like, oh my, I just simply stop and I take that in. And I want our viewers to know about your first book, your memoir, A Mother's Cry, A Mother's Celebration. Yeah.
That's right. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I forgot to keep that ready on my table.
That's okay.
But the
Don't
other
worry.
one always remains on my
Yes.
table.
Yes.
Yeah,
And the other one is what we'll definitely talk about today.
sure.
And for so many parents who follow this series, I want them to be aware of your first book. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your son with us. And so after his sudden, unexpected, horrific death, you were plunged into deep grief. And unlike so many people, what I'm hearing now is you had resources and training. However, nothing can prepare us for this. Mm-hmm. So tell me about the trajectory of your grief.
So you said it. Yeah, nothing can prepare us. I feel that nothing in the world can prepare us to become a parent.
I
You
love
know,
that.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we learn in every unfolding moment, especially mothers.
Yes, we
You know, we
do.
learn so much from our instinct. Nature
Yes.
guides us. Nature
Mm-hmm.
guides us in a way that maybe in the anxiety to manage our new motherhood, to manage the new life that we have been entrusted with. Um, we don't notice, but I think nature keeps sending us help.
Yes, absolutely. When we're
And
open to it and we listen to it.
yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Um, so I think something similar happened. Even so, nothing can ever prepare us to become bereaved parents also. Um, and in the last 6 to 7 years, and even before that, few cases, but last 6 to 7 years, so many. Um, and you work with such people. You are yourself, a testimony to uh, what the life of a bereaved parent is like. Um, One thing that I have learned is that even parents who could see it coming, the children having been in a terminal state for quite some time, to say that, can they be prepared to face that moment when the child is gone? No. It's not for no reason that the child loss is called ultimate bereavement. It is ultimate bereavement in a way. Of course, I don't mean to compare losses, or I don't mean to compare
No.
griefs. Um, that said, this is a kind of loss that I really don't know what words will I have. People say that I'm very good with my expressiveness, and I communicate well or whatever, but I have till date struggled to give my give my identity a name.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so which language, you tell me, is equipped to give a name to a bereaved parent? There's a widow and there's a widower and there's an
Yes.
orphan.
Mm-hmm.
What do we bereaved parents call ourselves? Especially the mother. This is in no way to undermine the grief of a father. But for mother, the the connection, the the relationship with the child has begun 9 months before, and it's a very visceral and very entwined connection.
It is.
It's
Mm-hmm. Suki Miller, in her book, Finding Hope When a Child Dies, addresses what you just said. Who are we, parents who have had a child die? There is no word for us. And the grief,
absolutely.
repeat the word that you used to describe the kind of grief we parents go through. You said it just a minute ago, and I would like our viewers to hear it again.
Um,
It was,
Sorry, I'm
well, bereaved grief, or you called it a special kind of grief.
ultimate bereavement.
Ultimate bereavement. Yes.
Ultimate
And
bereavement
I really want
is the
people.
term some books refer to. Some experts use this term,
Mhm.
particularly in reference to child loss.
Yes.
And still, it's such a complex loss. So I have worked with mothers from different parts of the world, and I noticed that it is not much different in different cultures and countries. Stillbirth, loss of pregnancy, till date continue to be treated more like physiological events. The grief of the mother who's had a stillbirth or who's had a loss of pregnancy is completely not recognized.
No, it is
Is
not.
it is so insensitively disenfranchised.
Mhm.
Some organizations will grant you 2 weeks of leave if you've had a miscarriage, and then be done with it and return to work. And the family is also like, you've had 3-4 days of rest. Now, what more do you want?
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. And I really,
It's not that.
go ahead. It's not that.
So, it's not that people around you are deliberately rude or hurtful. It's just that um, some losses are not even recognized as losses.
That's right. And I loved reading in your book the mother who reframed that loss as my child was born still. I thought that was so beautiful. I was so touched by that. And you know of what you're speaking yourself.
Yeah. I have myself had 3 miscarriages in between my 2 children. So I know what the protagonist in this story is saying. And yet I don't know, I can't claim to be knowing her pain. There's such a particularity to each one of us in our grief
Yes.
trajectory. You talked of grief trajectory. By the way,
Yes.
that story which you are referring to has a common connection for both of us. That story I have picked from one of the research papers of Dr. Robert Niemeyer. So
Yes.
I'll send you the paper. I'll send you the paper,
I
and
would like that.
that's
Mm-hmm.
that's a real case study that he's talking of. It's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful case study. So
It is.
coming back to the grief trajectory, for me, it was strange. Um, so as you said, I had the resources, I had the training, I had a background, and
You
yet
did.
the one person who I was totally uh, ill-equipped or unequipped to help was myself, for various reasons. A, it's just assumed that you don't need help, you will help yourself.
Mm-hmm. It is. However,
So, and on top, uh, different cultures and different families have different kind of dynamics. So the dynamics in my life were such that um, the the responsibilities that my circumstances have placed on my shoulder all along, pretty
yes.
complex and pretty heavy,
Yes.
um, uh, they continue to remain on my shoulders. Over and above managing uh, this phase of life for all of us in the family,
Mm-hmm.
wherein my younger son had just started college 2,200 kilometers down south in India.
Oh
He
my.
was just few weeks into his college, and he had just turned 18. For him, the number one person in his life was my eldest son, Utkarsh. So
Yes.
for him, the trauma was huge.
Mm-hmm.
And he had gone away from home for the first time, that too so far away.
Yes.
And all the time, my heart and mind was towards him. I used to make frequent trips down south to
Ah.
spend time with him, just quickly, make quick visits, 2-3 days, then come back, then go again after 3-4 weeks, like that. And and everything else at home was like, very quickly it returned to business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
So what I didn't realize was in the process, despite the background, and why am I underlining is because people who do not have the benefit of background, how much more tougher it may be for them. So I want
Yes.
people to sit up and take notice, especially bereaved mothers, um, bereaved parents, both of them, for everybody, anybody who's bereaved, that I didn't realize that the mass of strength, the stoic strength that my circumstances demanded me to wear and go about conducting the business of life as usual. Um, what would be the implications for me in the longer run? I didn't realize. My
Mm-hmm.
grief remained not unrecognized, not unaddressed, because I did steal quiet moments for myself. My tears didn't get any space. Um, so I used to, you would not believe, sometimes I used to go to gardens and hide in corners just to allow myself to cry.
Where would
And
you hide? Where would you hide? Say again.
in some corners, gardens, I used to go for nature walk to a garden. Delhi's,
Yes.
my city, New Delhi is full of gardens. So there are big
Yes.
gardens here.
Mm-hmm. I would
And
walk among the trees in the morning and
yeah,
cry.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just find a quiet corner, and there are such big gardens, you would find a
Yes.
quiet bench here or there.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to talk to birds and trees and grass and Mother Earth and
Mm-hmm.
skies. And so I wasn't getting any space to allow my own grief an opportunity to be acknowledged, to be affirmed, to be validated. And I was so busy managing things on the surface that about 2.5 years down the line, without
Mm.
any sign, without any signal, without any symptom, things started to explode at a physical level. I was all of a sudden diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, dangerously high numbers. When it was diagnosed as part of a routine checkup, uh, you know, and the numbers I did not believe. I thought they have just mixed up the samples. Whose
Yes.
result is this? And the doctor also, he asked for the repeat testing because there was no external sign or symptom.
Mm.
And but it was for real. I had an extremely painful and traumatic menopausal phase, and little bit of that was psychological also. Menopause is a difficult time for any woman.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Mm-hmm.
Um, to me, on top, for me, motherhood has been the mainstay of my life. For me, what is central to my existence? My motherhood experience is central to my existence.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So um, to have lost Utkarsh, and then soon thereafter to have lost um, my physical capacity to become a
Yes.
mother again, was
Yes.
like, I don't know how to put it in words. I'm sure you understand, and I'm sure your viewers will understand. It was hugely traumatic. It was, metaphorically speaking, that I had not just lost my son, but I was losing every chance to.
Exactly.
I felt cursed as a mother,
Mm-hmm.
except that when I would have my younger son around, things would change. And he was there in my heart and mind all the time. Um, but um, so my grief trajectory was like, in the beginning, everybody thought everything is all right, and she's being very brave and strong, and she's very quickly back on her feet. And but it was not so. It was an illusion, and beneath the illusion, a lot was going wrong. And I did not have any support in life, and I could not, muster voice to ask for support.
Yes.
So, and but my biggest support was my younger son. Overnight, the boy became somebody else. He was my first grief counselor and life coach. He's the one who
Amazing.
literally nudged me out of my shell of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to worry that is he maturing, ahead of his time. I used to really worry for him. Then one day I sat him down and I told him that, you continue to be the little toy of the family. You don't have to step up. You don't have to take the pressure to step up and become him. I
Mm-hmm.
love the way that you are maturing, but you do not have to expedite your maturation process.
Yes.
You don't have to fill up his space. You have to take up your own space.
Mm-hmm.
And my joy for you and my pain for him are
Yes.
both real, but they will never overshadow each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They will never clash. So, it was a long conversation. I'm just giving you a keyhole glimpse of that. And it's only 2, 3 years ago that he told me, he said, Mama, you have no idea how much that conversation, you know, helped me release
Yes.
my own
Gave him
anxieties
freedom,
in life.
actually.
Yeah.
You
And he
really
said
gave him
it actually
permission.
prepared, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
he's my dearest buddy in my grief trajectory. And Bob Niemeyer, our dear friend,
Yes.
couple of sessions with him were very, very helpful. So, talking of Bob Niemeyer, and we both know that his grief therapy approach is rooted in meaning, and that is what you know. So I was already into that before I discovered Bob Niemeyer.
Yes.
But work with him further grounded me into that. My grief trajectory, beyond a point, uh, it became livable when I realized that there are three things that I need to remember. One is that there's nothing to cope, there's nothing to manage, there's nothing to fix. I need to first and foremost learn to affirm my loss and my grief. It is now a reality.
It is. Mm-hmm.
Acceptance is extremely hard.
Oh, yes.
Acceptance will not happen in a moment. It will not happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It will sometimes be a snakes and ladder game. I would feel that maybe I have found a release in acceptance, but then it will come back, and there'll be a tidal rush back on me,
Yes.
and it will be like a whirlpool kind of a thing. Having said that, the only thing I
Mm-hmm.
could perhaps do is just sit there and witness my own pain. The starting is grief affirmation, and all along it is affirmation only. So one thing was that. The other, the moment I realized that grief does not forbid deep existential growth. In fact, the whole purpose of grieving is to help us find our deeper energy.
Yes. Our deeper, what
And
did you say? Say it again.
energy, deeper
Energy.
energy.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a deeper sense of meaning within. So the moment I realized that grief and growth can actually be existential partners.
Yes.
And this is what I call in this book, I call them existential co-pilgrims.
Yes.
So they are
Mm-hmm.
not canceling out each other. Grief
No.
is not banishing growth, and growth does not demand that first you be done with grief and then only I will start or I will ensue. No, they
No.
both hold space for each other, and they both allow space for each other. And when I understood that it is not grief to growth, it is grief and growth.
Tell
That
us
maybe
more
my
about
grief,
the two.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And uh, I had seen in many cases where people had taken help, and I had, done some professional work with them, or volunteering, or informal work with them. And I had learned from my own lived wisdom also that sometimes grief may never have a closure. It will not have a closure for life.
Yes.
And that too is fine as long as there are no pathological or medical complications.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, of course, we need professional help, and we should take professional help. But if grief has come to live with you, and it has it it knows how to create its own gentle space by your side, and you know how to honor that gentle space in
Yes.
your life for grief, then grief could actually be a very, very powerful, very meaningful guide.
Yes. Yes,
You know,
it
it
is.
shows you your those deeper sides, your those
Mm-hmm.
meaningful sides. Your pain is such such a creative guide.
It is indeed, when we stop to listen to it, to recognize it, to relate to
Absolutely.
it, then it becomes different. Mm-hmm.
Before this, one immediate loss that had happened very close is my uh, 11 years before that. At that time, in fact, Utkarsh had just turned 11, was when my father had passed away. He was
Oh,
about 69 and he had battled with cancer for 3.5 years. Um, it was a painful death. He was a healthy man, a man with impeccable health habits, all his life a teetotaler, non-smoker, non-tobacco
oh
eater.
my
So
word.
it was, it was like a shock to anybody and everybody. How could he get lung cancer of all the people?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
A man of impeccable hygiene and health habits. So it was a painful loss. Having said that, I could quickly come to terms with it. He was 69. He had lived a full life. He had done things in his life. He had seen things in his life.
Yes.
And though I felt for my mother, at the same time, I could find myself um, uh, being able to affirm that loss.
Yes.
But with Utkarsh, it was very hard for me to, my head and my heart often fought. There were 1,001 different whys.
Yes.
So, and I was gripped with fear. This A was the mortality consciousness,
Mm.
was really hard. Uh, Here you understand, that life is impermanent.
Yes.
You know the transitoriness and transience of life. But when it hits you, to know it here, to
Yes.
absorb it here,
Yes.
is the real test of your
It
strength.
is. It is.
And this strength to me is a strength that combines grit and grace both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me that you were able to know it here, but your body was saying, oh, the sweetness has gone out of this life. Pay attention. And all of a sudden, 2.5 years
Absolutely.
later, here came this dramatic call for care that you hadn't been able, I heard, to give yourself. And you and I
Absolutely.
have that similar trajectory. We were in the raw grief, and then we went to fragile grief, barely holding ourselves together. But the outside world thought, oh, look at these strong women and what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And it took a toll on both of us. It really, really
Yeah.
did. Mm-hmm. And so
And this is what I say, that strength can be a big myth. And this is why I use the term supple strength. In the chapter 5 of this book, I use the word supple strength, which is elaborated in a greater detail in the book that I'm currently writing on resilience. So, and and I say that allow this strength to feel vulnerable.
yes,
This
we're
strength too has its moments and phases of vulnerability. Allow it its rightful space and opportunity to be vulnerable.
So one of
And
the things we hear is that word vulnerability. And I didn't
absolutely.
mean to interrupt you, but tell our readers your experience, your definition of vulnerability, please.
Yeah. So it's very hard to define this thing, really.
I know
I
it
feel
is.
that it is such a subjective, such a to each one of us, our experience of vulnerability could be different.
It is.
Having said that, I would begin by asking the viewers and asking myself and asking you, asking each one of us, why is vulnerability a taboo word? Why are we not, easy with this word?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, if you look at the various dictionary meanings, you know, most of the words, are kind of, they indicate at lack of power. These are very disempowering adjectives descriptors that you read for vulnerability are very disempowering ones. So therefore, very out of convenience, very quickly we call vulnerability is same as weakness.
Yes.
And weakness is something that in human society, it's not a virtue to be prized.
No.
Where we are putting extra premium on being positive, as in positive. And I know what it means being an appreciative inquiry, master practitioner, master trainer and practitioner. I know that it can be so easily misconstrued as wearing a pretense of positivity. No, positivity to be positivity has to be authentic and meaningful.
It does indeed. Yes.
And vulnerability is rooted in an authentic touch within oneself.
Yes,
Can
it
I
is.
touch my truth?
Yes.
With raw courage. Can I see my truth? Can I touch my truth? And if that truth in this moment means that I am feeling extremely fearful or I'm in the grip of pain, so be it.
Yes.
Vulnerability helps me honor this truth in the moment. Now, honoring this truth does not mean that I kind of let go of my discernment, that I go around the town letting my this reality leak out and share it with the whole world, without being mindful whether they really are mature enough to handle my truth, be interested in my truth, capable of being a trusted partner, So this does not mean that I let go of my discernment.
Yes.
This simply means begin by, first of all, being courageous enough to face your truth as is.
Yes. And not run away or be distracted or do for others, but it's coming home to ourselves and really listening.
Absolutely. And then hold yourself in compassion.
Yes. And now we're in that
compassion.
Yes.
And then allow yourself time and space for this feeling to be absorbed. And once that absorption has happened, just be present and witness for what is now unfolding, because something deeper will definitely unfold.
Yes, but we have to give it time. We have to allow it to happen.
Yeah. It's David Rico, a Jungian scholar, says something really beautiful, which all of us who do cooking, we know that, across cultures, all the women or men or people who do cooking, everybody knows, but we don't pay much attention to such simple things in life, which are profound truths of life. He says that there's a time to knead the dough, and there's a time to let it rise.
Yes, it has to rest to rise too.
Yeah. And in that resting pause, nature is at work.
Say that again. In that resting pause, what? Say that again, please.
Nature is at work.
Yes, nature is at work. Something
Mother
beyond
Nature
us.
will send, absolutely. Mother Nature is going to send some help in some form or the other.
Yes. So for us to realize we're not alone and allow ourselves to be supported.
And in that moment, when you have allowed your vulnerability to be affirmed, is actually the moment when you realize that your strength is also sown in the same seed. Let that seed of vulnerability be broken open, because unless that seed breaks open, strength also will not. The sapling of strength will also emerge from the same seed.
I can't tell you how delighted I am that you're using this image and metaphor, because here at Integrated Wellbeing Institute, the new paradigm of grief, Neena, is you're not broken by this loss. You're broken open
Oh,
like a seed to grow
oh
in
my God.
self-awareness and new connections. And what do seeds do? They break open in the dark and they have to root down. And that takes strength and courage. It also takes the time and the rest and the pause in the darkness.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
amazing that you brought that in. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
really want our readers, though, to hear the 3 parts of your book. So I'm going to share them as part 1, The Maize of Grief, part 2, The Mystique of Growth, and part 3, The Marvel of Grace. And you referred to an aspect of grace when you spoke about compassion. So in our time remaining today, would you please share the acronym GRACE as you present it to those of us who are gifted by your creativity and intuition?
Thank you so much. Yes, I would love to. And if you permit me, I will take a minute extra to also tell about the acronym GROWTH, which is the second part of the book, which is the
Absolutely.
heart and mind of the book.
Right.
So
I know it is.
second part, which is the Mystique of Growth. That's where I present this 6-aspect model called growth. Growth is also an acronym. And
Yes.
so these aspects are also phases, but they are not necessarily linear in order, So
Yes.
to each one of us, a different phase may be the need in the moment. So whichever phase calls a reader the first or the strongest, I encourage them to go there. So G is for grief affirmation, within which I give a 5-aspect framework called Alive. Because for me, why grief needs to be affirmed is because those who are left behind are alive.
Yes, they are.
And as long as we are alive, in my son's words, my noble duty is to breathe, live, and live well. So grief affirmation is all about acknowledging the fact that I'm alive, and therefore my noble duty is to breathe, live, and live well. And then R is about resilient adaptation. Once we have affirmed our grief and we are face to face with our post-loss reality, we have to also adapt to that post-loss reality. And how we do that with a resilience, which is not necessarily a bravado kind of resilience, but a very supple resilience, which can combine compassion and courage, vulnerability and strength both together. And then O is for opening to the reality, emergent reality.
Yes.
W is very important. I would encourage your viewers to look for that. Way to well-being, because well-being is affected in grief journey at various levels: physiological, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, relational. So way to well-being, how we nudge by nudge, bit by bit, step by step, moment by moment, breathe by breathe, how we rebuild our little bit of well-being that we can. And T is for deeper transformation, and H is for harmonious re-emergence in life. So this is why my grief trajectory, it helped me, it empowered me to then start, holding the path for others as well, because this harmonious and meaningful re-emergence in life is what gave me this clarity that now this is what is my calling. This is what is going to be the main purpose of my life. So pain and purpose both came together in the same frame. Final segment, the Marvel of Grace, actually begins with chapter on forgiveness. And I don't know how many, you and I, we have read n number of books on grief. I cannot recall very many books on grief that talk of forgiveness in the context of grief.
Oh.
Especially, losses like yours and mine, which are ultimate bereavement losses. So child loss, even if you are prepared to face it, is very traumatic. So, or any other kind of traumatic loss, untimely loss, unexpected loss, all the more so. But even in normal bereavement, sometimes the whole assumptive world of our faith, our beliefs comes apart, and we're so angry, but we don't know who we are angry with and what we are angry about.
Mm-hmm.
And unawareingly, that can soon turn into bitterness or resentment, or just being very bitter about our reality, very angry about our reality. And so we need to forgive. But who do we forgive?
Yes.
Who are we angry with?
Right.
How do we forgive?
Mm-hmm.
And so forgiveness. I would say this chapter took me long to write. It took me nearly 4 months to write. I had to go through several rounds of forgiveness within myself, seeking
Yes.
forgiveness, giving forgiveness, offering forgiveness. So I would encourage your readers to read that as well. And finally, the GRACE acronym that you asked me to talk about. So G is for gratitude. And here, gratitude, I would insist, is not a one moment thing. It's a state of being. So more than gratitude, I would encourage you to think of it as gratefulness, of an embodiment of an attitude of gratefulness in life.
Yes.
So if your loved one is gone, and it is such a painful moment, such a painful phase in your life, what is there to be grateful about? Perhaps maybe on behalf of your loved one, to be grateful to those people who had been kind to your loved one.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Just do not let the sense of gratefulness evaporate from your life. There's so many things to still savor, to still cherish, to still revel about, and to still be grateful about. And R is then similar, kind of connected thing, reverence for life. Because
Reverence.
life has not died. Life has not died. Life does not die. Relationships do not die. If I, if I, um, if I just acknowledge the fact that the person's mortal body is gone, but the person's presence in my life, even though absent in a way, in a stark way, is still there. And and perhaps now I need to transform its form and allow it to become remembrance,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
begin by remembering, plus remembering the lost part of me, the lost
Yes.
part of my existence. So that is where reverence for life is very important. A is affirming life, again connected, saying yes to life. AYE, saying yes to life, no matter what. And for that, I would encourage your viewers to also pick up the book by the same title, Saying Yes to Life by Viktor Frankl.
Oh, yes.
It's a beautiful,
I saw that
such a
in your
beautiful book. Yeah.
endnotes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the C is for compassion. Now, compassion doesn't make you weak, it makes you very strong. As long as you remember to keep the element of discernment with you.
Yes.
Compassion doesn't mean that we let our energy leak. On the contrary, compassion means that we discern well where our energy is going and where our energy needs to go, how our energy deserves to be nourished,
Mm-hmm.
and preserved and all that. E eventually is essence of life. Meaning of life is not something so lofty that you have to go into the caves and do meditation for years and decades together to be able to discover this. Meaning of life is unfolding in every unfolding moment.
When we're aware. And that's
When we
why
are aware.
awareness is so important. Yes. Yes.
You've gone for a nature walk, and suddenly you notice that you're witness to a resplendent sunset.
Yes.
Can there be something more meaningful in life in that moment than being able to watch the splendor of nature?
Yes. And so if a person can't be in a place of gratitude for that, because they simply can't be, perhaps they can be in appreciation of the splendor. Yeah. And so, Neena,
and therefore, just to add to that, and of course there is bigger meaning also, bigger purpose also. So perhaps you could think of starting a legacy mission. Like I decided to take forward my son's mission of, I told you about Weekend Pavement Library. So
Yes.
my younger son and myself, we have been together setting up at least once every year, but we have done more than once in 2-3 years. So we've already set up 11 libraries in partnership with community, outreach organizations, grassroots organizations, which are serving the children from socioeconomically backward background.
As your son did
And
initially.
so 11 static libraries, one mobile library, and we have contributed to some other people's running libraries.
Wonderful.
So this is our one standing endeavor, plus some more things we continue doing. So this is, you can consider starting a legacy mission, taking forward your
Yes.
loved ones, and their absence is stark. At the same time, their absence deserves to be kept present.
It does
in a
indeed.
very present way.
Yes.
A very present way. So find your way to keep their presence there in your life and in the world.
Neena, this has been so rich and so wonderful. Thank you for the gift of your presence, your wisdom, your grief, growth, and grace to all of us. So it will have, yes, and I will have the information down so people can then absolutely get the book, because as I was rereading parts of it this morning, I thought this is the perfect group for a perfect book for a grief circle to read through. So thank you so much. Take deep care.
Thank you so much, and gratitude to you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.